Thanks, Peter. Okay, great. So thanks for joining today, guys. Let's get started here. So just having a look at the agenda today, what we're going to cover. We're going to firstly talk about what do we mean when we talk about a mono-repo? What does that mean? What does it look like? And how do you get started using a mono-repo? We're going to talk about one approach to managing your mono-repo. So this is an example. There's obviously going to be a lot of different ways to manage your Terraform code and how you structure it and how you work as a team on your projects. This is just one example. We're quickly going to have a brief overview of Terraform Cloud. So this is a Terraform talk. There is an assumption that everyone has a working knowledge of Terraform. You may not have seen Terraform Cloud before, so we will just briefly have an overview on that. Then we'll jump into a demo. It's a bit more exciting than looking at slides all day, so we'll try and get to that as quickly as we can. And then we'll just follow up with a summary at the end, and as mentioned, deal with any questions that we might have outstanding. Let's get going. So what do we mean when we talk about a mono-repo? A mono-repo is a monolithic source code repository. So it is just one single code repository for you to store all of your Terraform code. So it's not going to have any application code, but it will have all of your Terraform code. Now this is can be broken up into any way that you like, but we're just going to keep it simple in our case. You're not going to be using any advanced Git features, but you might find that you're looking at something like the directory structure on the slide here. Now, how did you end up with this? Well, a lot of people, when they first get started with Terraform, they look at our documentation, they look at HashiCorp tutorials, and you generally start with your hello world example running in a main.tf file. Then you iterate on that and you build out your projects, you build out your provisioning, and then you have a lot of resources in a single file and it's difficult to work with. The next step most people do is they break out those resources into different files, much like we have on the slide here. Break them out by components and resources so that as a practitioner, it's easy for you to know where to find things and work on your code. So this is a really common way to get started, and it's nice if you look at it and you can fairly quickly understand what's happening. So as a Terraform practitioner, you've now got your code, you're working, everything's going well, you've deployed your application, and you find that actually I need to make a change to something, I need to change one of my cloud resources, but if I change one of these files, I'm going to impact what I've already deployed. So how can I have different environments with this style? So the next step that a lot of people do is they'll scale it out to have multiple environments in different directories. So still using the same repository, but we have different directories. We copy our code into there, and then we can make changes in each environment without impacting the other environments. So this is great. It's really easy to manage our variables because our environment variables, credentials are going to be stored per environment so that we don't need to change them each time we're looking to make changes. And look, at this point, we've deployed 3 different environments with Terraform. We're probably getting more people involved saying, hey, look at this. This is how we should be doing things. Like, people can start learning Terraform and contributing to the repository in different environments as well. Now, things are starting to get a little bit tricky. And one of the problems that we have of managing this is that with all the different people and the different environments, we've got a lot of code repetition, and trying to keep all of that in sync can be a challenge as well. So how do we reduce code duplication and try and keep things a bit simpler? Well, one of the ways we can do this is we can start looking at modules. So modules are akin to, in what another programming language would be called a function. So we have a function, we can call that, we can pass it our specific variables, and then we're going to get back a known result. And this is very repeatable, and we can call this as many times as we like. So now we have our modules. In this example, we've got two. We have an EC2 module, we have a VPC module. Both pretty common resources if you're working in Amazon Web Services. So we've got our shared code. This is going to share these modules across the boundaries that we have here. So with our development, testing, and production directories, we've actually created some boundaries, and our shared code is going to cross these boundaries. They can call it as they need it and get the results that they're looking for. And we've started to reduce duplication, and we've also got the benefit here of introducing more standardization. So we're going to get the benefits from that as well, such as, have a bit more speed to get started and deploy these resources. We're going to have consistency across our environments to make sure things are compliant in a nice, simple way. All right, so now in our journey here, we started with a practitioner on a single laptop. They've expanded to 3 different deployment environments. We're starting to get other practitioners and people involved in our project and contributing. And we've got modules operating as well so that we can share code out and benefit from standardization. But we really need to work out how we're going to scale this further and how we're going to collaborate on this as the project keeps continuing to grow and be successful. And this is where we start to talk about Terraform Cloud. So what is Terraform Cloud? It is the best place to collaborate on Terraform code. It's a SaaS service that's going to solve a number of challenges if we're looking to scale Terraform. And some of those are going to be, how do we manage our state between these different environments and workspaces? How are we going to version our code? In this case, in our example today, we're going to connect Terraform Cloud directly to our code repository. How are we going to collaborate? How are we going to make sure that we're getting different people involved and that they can access only what they need to access? Okay. That's enough about blabbing on for a little bit. So let's jump into a demo. Okay. So the first thing I want to show everyone is that I've got a GitHub account here. I've got a repository. As you can see, it's a fairly simple repository, and it matches what we've been seeing in the slides. So we've got 3 environment directories: development, we've got production, and we've got testing. We've also got a directory called modules. And in here, we've got a few of our custom modules that have been built to reduce code duplication on a few resources. We can share this across environments. We'll have a look in our production folder. And we can see here, we've got a few files here. They're mapping out fairly well. You can get a good feeling for what you think they might do just by looking at them. So we know it's quite easy to get going. So let's map this out to our Terraform Cloud. So in this tab here, I've got Terraform Cloud open. You can see what we've got here just by looking at it is we've got 2 workspaces. Now, what is a workspace? A workspace is, it contains everything that we need to run a Terraform run. So we're going to have in there, we're going to have a copy of our code, we're going to have our environment-specific variables and credentials, our access controls, and we're going to have our state managed for us. So here we've got 2 already. We can see dev environment and test environment. What we're missing is production. So let's add that in now from our Git repository. I'm going to click on new workspace. Okay, we've got different options here. As I mentioned today, we're going to use our version control workflow, hooking straight into our source code management. We'll click GitHub. And as we see, Terraform Cloud has gone out to access my GitHub account, and we can see the first result here is the mono-repo repository, which I showed earlier. So we'll click on that. We need to give it a name. So for this one, we're going to call it our prod environment. We'll add a description. Okay. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to click on the advanced options down here. And this is going to give us a really important setting as we scroll down. It's got our Terraform working directory. And because we're using a mono repo, we've separated our code out using a directory structure. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell Terraform that we want it to run in a particular directory. So we're going to put production directory. Say, Terraform, please run only the code in the production directory. And we can see here a little bit further down, it says that it's already selected, only trigger runs when files in this specific path change. So it's going to make sure that we're operating independently in the production directory. We're going to click Create Workspace. Okay, so it's going to check that out for us. What we'll do here is we'll click on the tabs across the top, and we'll see we've got a variables tab. What we would have here is any variables that we might need for our environment in case we need to override something. In this case, it's all in the code, so we're good. And we've got our AWS credentials here as well, so that we can speak to the cloud. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger a new run so that we can do our initial deployment. And we're going to kick that off. Okay. Now, while that's going, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our code. We're going to have a look in our repository, and I'm going to make a change to one of our directories, one of our environments, sorry. So in testing, I'm going to have a look at this EC2 file. I'm just going to make a simple change here. We'll call it a new change. We're going to make this change. We've updated our code in a different environment, in a different directory. We'll come back. We can see here what we've got is this is our production environment. We have a look at our plan. We can see that we've got a few changes that have been queued up here. Some new things are going to be created. And if we have a look at the summary, we can see that we've got 22 resources to add. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to approve this change so that we can make our production environment and deploy that. Now, while this is happening, I'm going to jump around a little bit. We're going to have a look back here at our test environment. And we can see here that something has changed. It's got to change, and it's asking us for approval while our production environment is still deploying. So let's have a look here. Have a look at the run, and we'll get some details. So we can see here that our new change to our testing environment has been triggered directly from the code that we changed. And we can see that there's one additional resource array, 23 resources, because the code change that we made was to deploy another EC2 instance. Okay. Now, if we have a look back at our workspaces now, we can see that our production is still making some changes here, still deploying, but we can see that we're deploying many resources into our production environment. Now, I'm just going to let that keep running. Oh, it's finished and it was successful, so that's great to see. I'm going to go back to the slides and just explain what we talked about. So what we talked about there and what we just went through in the demo was that our code was structured in such a way that we had our environments operating independently of each other. And when we moved over to start using Terraform Cloud, one of the important considerations that we had was how does our Terraform Cloud map to our code? And so what we did was that we created a Terraform workspace for each environment so that they could run independently from each other, have different teams with different privileges working on them, and changes wouldn't overlap each other. So a change in production didn't impact a change in dev or testing and vice versa. So one of the considerations that you have when you're looking to go to Terraform Cloud with a monorepo is how are you going to make sure that your changes don't impact each other? And this is one example of a way that we can structure our code and our Terraform to make sure that we don't impact other people in other teams and other projects. So in summary, monorepo is one of many approaches to structure your Terraform code. It's really great for small teams and projects or where visibility is required and people need to see all of the code that's in a wider scope. The Terraform Workspace to code mapping is an important pattern, and we just need to be aware of that as we're scaling up. Something we didn't touch on in a lot of detail was code sharing and using modules. And if we were to have a lot of modules changing at a different rate to our code, how we might address that. But the important thing overall is that Terraform Cloud is flexible enough to work with your existing workflow today as you're getting started and as you scale up. And whether you're using a monorepo like we've discussed, or you're looking at more advanced features such as Git branching and long-lived branches, or if you're deploying a polyrepo and using many small repos, that you can still operate that with Terraform Cloud. So it's back to you, Pete.
Thanks for that, Pat. Great demo and explanation. Now I'm just looking to see, we've got quite a few questions in the Q&A, which is good to see. I saw that Dave Wright had answered a couple of them. And Dave, feel free to jump in. But what I might do is just call out the questions, Pat and Dave, and if you want to answer them verbally, that would be good. One of the questions, Pat, was, I thought the demo was supposed to show updating one resource, but it looks like it added 22. Can you clarify? And
yes, so I can jump in there and answer that one. So there was the reason that it was 23 resources is that we were deploying in that particular environment from scratch. So as I reset the environment for the demonstration, I had removed all of the resources. So that's why we had 23 in total, which was one additional to the production. But if it was already deployed, then it would have been one additional resource. So that's correct. I hope that helps.
Great. And I can see Dave's in there answering a few of the questions as well. I might just read out another if I could, Pat. What other options are there other than monorepos?
So as we touched a little bit briefly on the end there, some of the other options you have would be using Git branches, so that you might have a branch per environment. So you could possibly have a development branch of a repository and a testing branch. That is one option. You might also be doing feature branches. So off one environment, you could have a feature branch to do any testing or expansion, and then merge that back into the main branch of your repository. And another option would be to use different repositories altogether. So you could have many small repositories, which allows you to sort of manage the rate of change and do versioning of your code. So you might use Git versioning or Git tagging as a way to track, how you're going to deploy off those different repositories.
That's great. I've got a few more if you've got time, and for those who are staying on, thank you. And again, Pat or Dave, given two applications, my app and my second app, would they have their own development workspace, or would they share the one workspace?
But this really depends how your team and your code are structured and work together. there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's about what's going to work for you. So I think if you're running it depends how your app is going to work with other parts of your project and your overall deployment. You know, some people even structure their repositories so that similar resources are grouped together. So you might have a team that's responsible for all of the databases and a team that's responsible for networking, and then have those resources managed independently of the other projects. In the example, App 1 and App 2, and what we went through today, I think that if we were to expand the demonstration, it would have a separate workspace to manage as it was a separate resource. But in the real world, it really depends who's responsible for that application, how the life cycle of App 2 works with App 1. Are they independent? Then maybe it's better to have independent workspaces. Or are they very tightly coupled? Then perhaps you could keep them in the same workspace. Sorry to be vague. I hope that helps understand a little bit more.
Thanks, Pat. I think we've got time for maybe 2 more questions. There are quite a few, but what I'll do is I'll copy these questions and we'll get back to the individuals if we don't have time. Here's one other question. In larger organizations, cross-team code sharing is important for security, compliance, etc. Would mono-repo apply across all teams, or best to keep code repos separate for different teams?
As I said earlier, it really depends on how your teams are structured and how your applications and workspaces are working together and depending on each other. Some of the key things we really want to look out for is limiting the impact of changes in one workspace impacting other workspaces. So you want to make sure that if you've got one team managing something, that they're not going to break something in another part of the business or another team. One of the things to look at is if you are doing code sharing widely across different teams and departments, would be looking at something like the module registry and having a single repository for your shared code modules so that you can version them and tag them independently, and then make sure that if there are changes that might break something for a team in one of those shared modules, that team is able to stick to a specific version or release tag so that their code is not impacted. Because that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to work together, get everyone using shared code to reduce duplication, increase compliance, but not impact people without them knowing about it. No surprises.
Cool. All right. Let's go for one more, and then, like I say, we'll try and get to the others. Happy for people to stay on. Pat, if you've got time, we can get through a few more. Just let me know. Another question: can we use branches of Git instead of the directories for different environments?
Yeah.
Do you think this can make it simpler and helpful to merge into production environment?
Yeah, look, I think that Git Branches is a great way to go and a great tool. It's definitely, we do have customers using that and who are successful in using that method. So if you're comfortable doing that and your team's comfortable, it works for you, yeah, I'd encourage you to keep doing it.
Okay, we'll just ask a couple more. They're really flooding in. So here's another one. In local, we can use Terraform state action. In TFC, can we do the same management?
Oh, I'll have to get back to you on that one. I'm not 100% sure at this point.
Okay. Let's do one more, or maybe 2 more, if you've got time. In the demo, it seems that it has 3 workspaces while module is shared across the workspaces. If module is updated, will it trigger all 3 workspace automatically?
No, it won't. So the modules are stored. So the module code is stored in the Git repository with the Terraform code, and each workspace is only watching the directory that we've told it to watch. So when I created the production workspace, I said only watch the production directory. So any change to the module would not impact those workspaces and those deployments. So we could, it wouldn't trigger a run.
Okay, thanks. Another one is how to control the security across multiple repos in the GitHub with multiple teams from Terraform Cloud. I guess that is how do you control the security across multiple repos? Yeah.
If you're using many repos, then you would have, I mean, the access control in GitHub or Git, whatever you're using for your version control is separate to what you would be using in Terraform Cloud. So your Git permissions are going to be separate and you can manage that separately. In Terraform Cloud, we have role-based access control so that you can control what users and teams can access what workspaces, which workspaces. So yeah, over those permissions do not are not directly related. I hope that helps.
Okay. We haven't had this many questions for a while, Patrick, and so if you want me to keep asking, I can keep going. There's lots here.
Yeah, let's try for more minutes, but I do need to drop off for another call.
Okay, we'll do one more. How's that? How do you suggest IAC be applied in microservice ecosystems? Will it be in one repo as infra repo or multiple repos based on the number of microservices?
It's an interesting question. I think it's not something that I'm able to answer succinctly. I think it might be worthwhile reaching out to someone from HashiCorp for a bigger conversation around that. There's many different ways to manage that. You have to keep in mind that if you're doing infrastructure as code and trying to manage microservices, you've also got the platform that you might be worrying about as well. So how do you manage the platform, and then how do you manage those applications, and what's the workflow that your team is currently using to get into production or make those services available where they need to be. So I think that's part of a wider discussion.
That's great. Thanks, Pat. Appreciate your time. You've answered lots of questions. And for the folks on the call, I'm just copying all the questions here now, and we'll go through them and try and get back to each person individually with some answers. So, folks, that brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you for staying on. It's good to see that nearly everyone who joined has stayed on for the entire session. So that's fantastic. As I mentioned at the top of the call, this session was recorded, and I'll send out a link to the recording in an email soon, and I'll also include some links to other supporting materials. And if you like what you heard today, I suggest, and you want to learn more about the topic, I suggest you go to our Learn pages on the HashiCorp website, which you'll find at learn.hashicorp.com. And Pat, if you just want to go to the final slide there, just so people can see those links. And if you do have any other questions, if you squint hard, you can see Pat's email there. It's pcarey@hashicorp.com. So if you have any questions to fire at Pat, please take down his email and send it, but we'll have it in the recording and I'll send it through to you as well. But that Learn site is there, learn.hashicorp.com. I suggest you go and have a look there. You'll probably find the answers to your questions. And also don't forget, this is a series. We do run these regularly, these snapshots. We run them every 2 weeks. So please go onto our website there at hashicorp.com/events/#snapshots to see what else is coming up. So thanks again for everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and bye for now. I'll see you on the next one.